want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. My name is Fred Litwin.
Noted author Fred Litwin. And of course, Fred is also the author of I Was a Teenage JFK Conspiracy Freak, On the Trail of Delusion, and Oliver Stone's film flam, The Demagogue of Dealey Plaza.
Joining us, Fred Litwin. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Welcome to another edition of On the Trail of Delusion, where we try to separate the wheat from the chaff and try to give you something interesting on the JFK assassination, as opposed to some of the ridiculous slop you'll see on the internet and on YouTube. So today my special guest is Adam Gorightly, who is an author who has written many books, but also has a terrific website, Historia Discordia, which you'll see a link to in the bottom. And his articles have appeared in all sorts of publications on the internet, underground magazines, countercultural publications. But what's of real interest to us here on this podcast is that Adam has done some absolutely fundamental, amazing work on people like Kerry Thornley, Fred Chrisman, Thomas Beckham, and Raymond Broshears. These are all names that sort of came out of or were associated with the Garrison investigation. And so I'm very happy to have Adam with me today. And Adam, tell us how you got into looking at some of these characters.
Well, thanks for having me on, Fred. Well, let's start with Kerry Thornley. Back in the, early 90s or so, I became aware of him. Probably even earlier than that. I was, during that period, had started writing for zines, and I was really interested in conspiracy theories and UFOs and paranormal and all this kind of far out stuff. Thornley came into my awareness. First of all, I saw some articles he had written for a zine called Fact Sheet 5, which was really an important zine during that period. Fact Sheet 5 was basically a catalog this guy named Mark Zunderloy put out, listing all the zines available. He did this month after month, put a lot of work into it. And I saw a column called Conspiracy Corner by this Kerry Thornley guy. And it's like, I actually couldn't make a lot of sense out of it, but I became more aware of him. And as time went on, I came across a book called Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes by an author named Jonathan Vankin, you might be familiar with.
Yep.
And he was covering some of the more far-out conspiracy theories in that book, becoming prevalent at the time. And some of the characters, one of whom was Kerry Thornley. And just a thumbnail sketch, Thornley had known Oswald in the Marines for a short period of time, then got sent over to Japan, where Oswald had been previously stationed at Atsugi. And he was working on a book during that period called The Idle Warriors, which was like being a Marine during peacetime, the Cold War, and kind of the malaise and things going on with that period. And he based them. The main character in the book was Johnny Shelburne, which Thornley based on himself and other Marines he had known in that period, including Lee Harvey Oswald. And so Thornley got over to Japan, and that's when around the time that Oswald defected, and he went, whoa, I'm going to change the focus of this book to be entirely on Oswald. So that was kind of the first curiosity that he had known Oswald in that period, and was writing a book about Oswald prior to the Kennedy assassination. And so Vankin covered that in his article about Thornley, and he also got into some of the more far out theories surrounding Thornley, who was investigated and indicted by, I'm not sure if he was ever indicted.
Yeah, no, he was.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
by Jim Garrison. And Garrison had these smattering of theories. One that Thornley was the second Oswald, that he was connected to the military and the aerospace industry, and they were somehow involved. And he also claimed that Thornley was CIA, and on and on and on. And so Thornley denied all those accusations initially, but then later, like in the 70s, after the Garrison investigations, he started thinking about that. And he was also, some would say, suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, which might have been helped along by, the prosecution of Jim Garrison causing that paranoia. But he was looking back, and now by this time he was thinking, well, maybe Garrison got some things right. There was a lot of odd stuff going on during that period. And how did I happen to run my paths and Oswald come together? Was there some other sinister force there? Was the conspiracy setting him up as an alternative patsy? So he started believing all these things, or entertaining these notions. And ultimately, at one point, he started to believe he was a part of the MK Ultra project, and that he and Oswald were part of a Nazi breeding experiment to create, these future assassins of America. His life kind of spiraled out of control during that period. And so that was kind of a nutshell of Thornley in that book Venkin put out. It was just one chapter, and I was fascinated by the guy. Started collecting materials, and Venkin said at one point he was considering writing a biography of Thornley, and I go, oh man, I'll love it when that came out. He never got around to that, and I had this material, and eventually I had enough content I felt to pursue writing a book on Thornley, and that turned out to be The Prankster and the Conspiracy, which was published in 2003. So I guess you're asking how I became interested in these characters. That was one of the characters, and how I became
and you also published this book, Caught in the Crossfire, which I have to say is an absolutely fantastic book. And anybody interested in Kerry Thornley, this is the book to get. It's chock full of primary sources, documents, photographs, stories. I mean, it's absolute essential reading, and you'll find links to it in the comments below.
Came into contact. How did this happen? It was kind of odd how I came into contact. We were never quite clear how our paths crossed, but I met up with a guy named Bob Newport, and this was after I wrote the Thornley book. I think I might have, I interviewed him for the Thornley book, actually. He was friends with Thornley growing up, and he mentioned he had some Discordian archives, and I didn't even mention that Thornley and a buddy of his named Greg Hill started this spoof religion back in the late 1950s called Discordianism, which is the worship of the Greek goddess and of chaos and discord. It was kind of started as a spoof religion, but became a kind of collective for different artists where they shared ideas, and it was kind of a platform to kind of riff on different religions and philosophy and politics. And it was a circle of different writers and artists that exchanged sometimes humorous stuff, collages. They had these things called groovy packs, where they'd send a bunch of things in a envelope with a joint usually, and you take the joint out and take a hit and put your own spin on this collection of materials sent to you, and send it on to the next guy. And a lot of this material became, like these projects, ended up in a book called The Principia Discordia, which you could say was kind of the Bible of Discordianism. So anyway, where I was going with all this,
and
Bob
here's a book that a very important book, sort of the origins of the Discordian Society, which you were part of writing this book.
Right. And that's where I was going. Newport told me at one point he had some what he called the Discordian archives, and I actually met him at Robert Anton Wilson's house in like 2001, and he brought an armload of this material. I thought, oh, this is some great stuff, you know. I'd like to maybe use it for a book at some point. He said, well, you're welcome to do that. I'll let you take some of this along. There's more I have, but so I borrowed that and scanned it and started working on this book. And later on, we're like in 2009 or so, he said, I was in LA where he lived, and he said, well, come on over and you can have everything. And it turned out to be, a dozen of boxes, which was all the material that Greg Hill had put together for these archives over the years. And a lot of them were, I mean, he just saved everything. He's all his correspondence, and he's saved, the carbons of what he sent out to people. And there was just a wealth of material. And some of that stuff in there was files on the Garrison investigations and a lot of the communications Thornley was having with different people during that period. So all that material that kind of fell in my lap has been used for these different projects.
Is that material in some sort of physical archive somewhere?
I'm actually working on that right now. The archive is at my house here,
Okay.
and it should be going into a library archive. It's probably going to happen at the end of this year or early next year. More news to follow on that. But yeah, I've been working at placing it at a library for quite some time, and university library
Well,
in
that's
California.
that's good. I'm struck with Thornley and the fact that Garrison went so far as to think that he was the body in the Oswald photograph in the backyard. And
Hmm.
I,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just and what's amazing is that people like Broshears were sort of into selling that as well. Oh, I recognize those hips. I mean,
yeah.
it's it's
Um,
it's so ridiculous.
I guess Oswald's the one who started that rumor because I think
Yep,
was it he or someone had said that, well, that's not me. My head's been superimposed on that photo of me. Where was it? In Fort Worth or wherever he
yeah, it was in his
had.
backyard in down in Dallas on Neely
Okay.
Street.
Holding the communist literature in one
Yeah,
hand and I
with a
guess
rifle. I've been there. I've been to that house, the
oh,
backyard.
and so anyway, that kind of rumor got started, and Garrison heard about it, and he just picked up on these things. Thornley's dad was a photo engraver of some sort, so he
That's
thought
right.
that his father or Thornley would have had the skills to do that, and that. But then Broshears testified. I guess it was Broshears who really said, "Yeah, that was Thornley in the backyard posing as Oswald," and that started a lot of the second Oswald stuff. And there was witnesses. Garrison said he had several witnesses who saw Thornley with Marina Oswald, but that never really panned out when I was looking at. There was one witness who came forward, but it all seemed sketchy. It was
Yeah, and I mean he told, I mean he even wrote a memo to the HSCA about the backyard photograph and how lucky we might be because the father was a photo engraver, and then he
yeah,
he was just so insistent. Garrison so believed that Thornley was in New Orleans when Oswald was there. And they must have crossed paths because Barbara Reed, said that,
hmm
they had been together. Another
there
character
what
they write about.
yeah, and there was some overlap as I recall
There was a few
between
weeks.
yeah, uh, them being at the same. Who knows? Well, yeah, you would have thought Thornley would have recognized Oswald quite obviously, but
And if he
Barbara
and
Reed,
if
yeah,
he had seen Oswald, he would have been really interested in talking to him, and really, there's no reason to
yeah.
hide that. I mean, he would have been really interested.
Barbara Reed claims she saw them together in a coffee house or restaurant, and then if you look through some of that materials, there supposedly was a second witness, and there was an affidavit produced by this fellow. I forget his name, but it was never signed. So it seemed like one of those things where Reed or Garrison put it together and say, here, sign this so we can have another witness. And whoever it was didn't sign it. That kind
Yeah.
of tells you something. Yeah, Reed was a character herself. We talked about the Discordian Society, this kind of crank religion of these. Uh, it was a real mix of like libertarians, bohemians, pranksters, and really when it started in the Southern California, it was just three guys, Hill, Thornley, and Bob Newport. But when they went to New Orleans, they uh, kind of started a New Orleans branch of the Discordian Society there with another character called Roger Levin, who kind of got sucked into the Garrison investigation at one point, and Barbara Reed was involved. And Reed claimed that she was the goddess Iris herself. She was involved in all kinds of stuff. I mean, she was pretty fundamental to the resurrection of the old style jazz scene being
Yeah.
reinvigorated there in New Orleans. That's something certainly positive you can say about her. And
Yeah.
but she was also one. Some people described her as she was somebody who always put herself in the middle of these different situations, whether she actually had any connection to them. And there's rumors that her and Garrison had some type of relationship, and she was basically kind of like Jack Martin, initially a witness, but then they become part of the investigation team. So you can see how this whole thing was so conflicted.
Yeah, and Weisberg would spend a lot of time with Barbara Reed's house and trying to sort of get information from her or bounce ideas off of her, and they'd all meet at her house, all these people together, and it was like a cauldron of rumors. I mean, New Orleans, everybody was talking in New Orleans.
I think Thornley made the mistake. At some point, he met Reed. He'd returned to New Orleans for a little bit of time, like in '64 after the assassination, and the topic came up, and I think she confronted him at that time, saying, "Well, yeah, I saw you with Oswald. Don't you remember that?" And he's gone, "Well, no, I guess it could have been possible, and I didn't recognize him." And this opened up the
Yeah.
the whole thing to spin out of control.
Yeah, and I feel for Thornley. I mean, he was dragged to New Orleans and indicted, and he didn't have a lawyer. And the Garrison's men are trying to convince him of a whole variety of things and cross-examining him, and I mean, my God, he was put through the ringer, and then you had the ridiculous Harold Weisberg actually asking, I think, Fred Newcomb to, can you draw some whiskers on a picture of Thornley to make him look like Oswald?
Yeah, I was looking at some of that material today, and somehow Thornley did have a lawyer at one point named Levine, and somehow they came across this correspondence with the DA's office with Fred Newcomb, and they
Yeah,
sent Weisberg was involved. They sent a photo of Thornley out of the Tampa Times, and they asked Newcomb if he could retouch it. A lot of basically the hairline to make him look more like Oswald. I guess they're pursuing this theory. So once again, uh, I don't know exactly what they did with that photo, but it wouldn't be surprised me if his investigators had the touched up photo and taken around. Do you recognize this
and
fellow? And
and then Weisberg wrote the letter on DA stationery, and then
yeah,
to make it look all official, and it was just a bizarre incident. And then,
yeah,
I mean, and then David Lifton got involved because he became friends with Kerry Thornley and realized, well, this is all silly.
yeah.
And so he started writing about that out in Los Angeles. And it was just an interesting. Sylvia Marr was a friend of Kerry Thornley's.
Yeah, she wrote a letter kind of defending him. And
Yeah, they exchanged several letters, and he sent her a lot of Discordia stuff, and they exchanged letters, and I think she contributed to his defense fund, and she early on realized this was all so ridiculous.
but Thornley was poking the bear, we might say, when it came to Garrison. He wrote a few different things saying how Garrison was an out of control authoritarian and things like this, and they even became part of a Discordian prank called Operation Mindfuck,
Right.
where and it had to do, part of that came out of there was that dude Alan Chapman, who I guess was supposedly an investigator. He's a Dealey Plaza regular, as they called him. And he was a John Birch Society guy who believed that the Illuminati was involved in the assassination, which was a pretty common kind of John Birchian thing at that time that was being spread. But he was the one who came up with, as I understand it, he got a hold of those three tramp photos and got those to Garrison. But anyway, Thornley heard about Chapman
And
and his
Chapman was the
theory
one who
about,
really convinced Garrison that there was a shot from the sewer.
right. Yeah, that's it.
So
And
you have this thing. Chapman goes to see Garrison, convince him there's a shot from the sewer, and like one day later, Garrison is issuing press releases. There's a shot from the sewer. I mean, it's just,
we've solved it. There
yep.
was whatever, two men, men, six men, men on the triple overpass. It was a constantly changing, but he'd announce it like, we've solved it. It's over.
Yeah.
It's a done deal. I was going to say this. So this Illuminati thing tickled Thornley and Robert Anton Wilson, these other guys, and they got interested in researching the Illuminati, and they tied it into the Discordian Society. And some of the prank letters they sent, I mean, they'd send stuff to like Welch with the John Birch Society and other people, but apparently they sent some to Garrison claiming, yeah, that the Illuminati was behind the assassination. And I found one in Weisberg's files. It was Robert Anton Wilson wrote a spoof letter along those lines to Weisberg. And Weisberg was one of the saner of this bunch too, you know.
Well, yeah, in a certain sense, but
Yeah.
so yeah, Thornley was a fascinating character. But that led you to write about people like Beckham, Chrisman, and Broshears. I don't know if you want to
hmm
talk about one of those characters.
Um, yeah, with brochures, I'd been reading Kennedy assassination books for a long time, like you, as a young man, and I came across different pro Garrison stuff back in the mid '80s or so, and I go, wow, that's a lot of his theories and the people he claimed were perpetrators involved in the conspiracy. They show up in other books. People were repeating this, so it was, and of course Oliver Stone ended up writing with it. But you see that stuff as a young guy, and it's like, wow, this is the district attorney of New Orleans. He's got a lot of power, and you hear him talk, charismatic guy and all that. And it's like, yeah, I start repeating this stuff as fact. Later on you dig into it, it's like, oh, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
um, but I remember seeing brochures mentioned in a book by Bernard Festerwald,
Yeah.
Coincidence or Conspiracy, I think it was called.
Yeah, it was a paperback book, yeah, which I have, yeah, Bernard Fensterwald.
Yeah, and it's like a who's who and a good resource at the time. And Brochures was in there. And once again, it's one of those characters. It's like, what? This guy, they said he knew Ferry, knew that Ferry was part of the assassination team, but then Brochures had also threatened the LBJ at one point. He was also involved in UFOs. It's like,
Yeah.
what is this guy? Then as I was writing the first Thornley book, started coming across, in the National Archive files of Garrison Broshears' statements. And yeah, he's making all these claims that Thornley was part of this group of assassins that were also homosexuals, and that somehow that was part of the motive. And he seemingly connected Clayshaw and Ferry and Thornley to the assassination. And yeah, he had these crazier ideas like the superimposed photo. And in the Discordian archives, I came across other materials in the correspondence. And I think you mentioned this in your book, where a friend of Thornley's named Louise Lacey had some interactions with Broshears in the around 1970, so I kind of incorporated that into the book and showed what a kind of she thought he was nuts. It had to do with I don't know if I need to go into the all the details, but he was another one of these characters, kind of like Barbara Reed, involved in a lot of different stuff. Some of it seemed pretty positive, like he was helping homeless people in his mission there in San Francisco, and he had a hand in what was it, the first Gay Liberation Day in San Francisco. But then he was somebody who'd always have a falling out with people and got into a big row with lesbians of San Francisco. So they kind of kicked him out in following years of being involved in the gay liberation. So he kind of started his own. He had this group called the Lavender Panther, which were like gay vigilantes that were going to take on people who were beating up gays. And he was just always showing up in papers, but he's also kind of a unhinged guy who's always getting into confrontations with people and had mental issues. And here we go. This is one of your
And
Garrison's
wore
main
a
witnesses.
priest collar. He was sort of a supposed reverend, a man of the cloth, but who knows how real that is?
And well, he got some credentials through the Universal Life Church,
Right. Yes.
which anybody could get at that time. And so did the likes of Fred Chrisman, Kerry Thornley. I mean, a lot of people were becoming Universal Life ministers for a lot of different reasons. Tom Beckham as well. Part of it was to run scams. I think some people during the Vietnam War era thought they could avoid the draft, becoming a minister. And so there's a lot of different motivations, but Garrison came across that these guys were all ministers and stuff. And that led to another one of his theories, that they were the so-called, somebody later called these wandering bishops, that were using these fringe or obscure religious churches, organizations as fronts to hide their activities as political assassins. I mean, and part of that, I think, was based on Jack Martin was feeding them that information, but he was also involved in these groups as well, with David Ferry. So it's
Yep.
like you're involving all these other peoples, but your main witness, you're letting slide because he's feeding you the information you want to hear. Jack Martin, another crazy, unreliable narrator, just like Barbara Reed and Reverend Raymond Broshears, and these were some of Garrison's.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that Broshears went on a TV show and basically claimed that he had channeled Lee Harvey Oswald at a séance. And Oswald said, "Well, I'm innocent," and that's when the Garrison's men really got interested. Oh, well, he also said he knew Ferry, so they got interested. They brought him to New Orleans. Of course, it was a great holiday for Broshears. He was off with the boys for a week, having a great time.
Chrisman too got a vacation with he and his lawyer, and there was a big. Chrisman was trying to squeeze more money out of Garrison. At the time, he was given $500 for he and his lawyer to go to New Orleans, and Chrisman said, well, that's not enough, to pay our time. But you look at $500 and when was that?
68.
1968. It's more like I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000. So it was plenty, and he spent that weekend there and had a good time apparently,
Yeah.
and enjoyed it. Talking to I have interviewed his son, Fred Chrisman Jr., who's around,
Oh, wow.
and he said that Chrisman was absolutely thrilled, almost giddy to get the attention and go to New Orleans. Thornley's wife or ex-wife that by that time wasn't thrilled at all. She was pissed and kind of upset by the whole thing. They were separated at the time, and so Fred Chrisman Jr. had those memories
Do you think
of that
did
period.
you think I mean Garrison learned about Chrisman through and Beckham through an anonymous letter. Do you think Chrisman
Mm.
wrote that letter?
First let me say Chrisman had an extensive history of writing fake letters. So under assumed names. Some other insights from Fred Chrisman Jr. He lived with his Chrisman and his wife were separated, but Fred Jr. would visit like in the summer there in Tacoma, and Chrisman had a office, uh, underground lair where he'd do what Chrisman Jr. called his his father would do his disinformation work. And the setup he had there was a large desk there with three different typewriters. So he'd use different typewriters to produce letters, that'd be harder to trace, and he'd collect different stuff like letterheads from wherever government agencies. If there was an estate sale or like a law firm that went out of business, he'd collect different things that he could emboss to make it look official. So there's a lot of evidence that he concocted a lot of letters. And I have a few of those just to show them in the book I'm working on Chrisman. But unfortunately, a lot of his home files got tossed out. Chrisman Jr. has a few examples of stuff and photos that he shared with me. So yeah, Chrisman had a history of doing that. There's two anonymous letters. The first one was named five people who were involved who had information. So two of the people named were Chrisman and Beckham. There was also Sergio Arcacha and Louis Rebel. They were part of that Friends of Democratic Cuba anti-Castro group.
Yeah.
Somehow they got lumped into this letter, and also somebody called Martin Grossi. There's no Martin Grossi. There was a Giulio Grossi. So
And there's Bob
seems like these
Lavender.
are
Bob Lavender as well.
well.
Or
Bob
he came later.
Lavender,
I guess he came later.
think at least Garrison suspected, and Boxley, his investigator, they suspected he wrote this letter. It wasn't signed, but he's connected to that letter, and that's why Boxley went to interview him about that, and he had some of the same information that appeared in that letter. So it's hard to say exactly if Lavender, what his role was. Was he just repeating that information he had overheard from Beckham and Chrisman, or was he a collaborator in this farce? So there was that letter. Then there was the second anonymous letter. That first anonymous letter was like 67, and early 68 was the one that is just a one-page letter, anonymous, not signed to anybody. There's this guy you need to check on in Tacoma, Chrisman. He travels around the country and he's involved in this thing. Jim, you need to look at this guy, whatever.
Yeah.
And that seems more like a Chrisman letter. You just don't know for sure, you know.
Yep.
But Chrisman had this habit of, or he was trying to build this mystique around himself. I mean, it goes back to the UFO days and I believe hoaxing the Maury Island UFO incidents in his letters about battling the underground creatures, the Diros in Burma during World War II. He was just creating this mystique around himself as this action man who was involved in paranormal events and was a deep cover secret agent. There is the famous document called the Easy Papers. Are you familiar with that?
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure Chrisman concocted that. It's like a 6-page document allegedly written by an analyst at CIA who pulled Chrisman's file to lay out this information about him. And it's obviously a hoax. But yeah, it reads just like other Chrisman hoax letters. I shared that with Fred Chrisman Jr. And
Right.
I'm not a big fan of AI or any of that, but he said my son and wife want to run this through Chat GPT to compare it to his book Murder of the City, Tacoma.
Right. Which is right here.
Yep, and according to Chat GPT, it's the same author.
Huh. Okay.
What that means, I don't know. There's a lot of slop that comes with AI, but
Yep.
it was an interesting analysis.
Yeah. So yeah, and of course, Garrison receives these anonymous letters, and he then has to bring Chrisman in to testify. And Chrisman said nothing. I mean, really nothing. And then Garrison went on to tell the HSCA, "You got to look at this guy, Chrisman. He's a real suspect in the assassination." And lo and behold, he's not even in Garrison's book.
Yeah, he had a bee in his bonnet about Chrisman for sure. Um, well, he was, as you know, he was in the original version of
Yeah,
Chrisman's book,
Garrison's
and
book. Yeah, he was in the
oh,
original version of Garrison's book.
excuse me, yeah,
Yeah.
Garrison's book, but was moved later. And I talked to Larry Happenin about that when Garrison was writing that, called his assassination memoir, whatever, On the Trail of the Assassins. Yeah, you're familiar with that title. He intended, yeah, to have a chapter on Chrisman. I think the first publisher looked at, I forget who this was now, but they said, "You promised us a connection with the CIA, and it's just not here with Chrisman, you know? It's
Yeah, that
not
was Prentice
working."
Hall.
There you go, yeah. And so Garrison regrouped and he contacted Fred Newcomb, who was involved in that touch-up photo stuff, and said, at that time, the House Select Committee on Assassinations had ended, and Garrison wasn't happy with the work they did on Chrisman. It was his opinion. He gave them a bunch of leads to follow where they could have proved it, but nothing. They, determined that Chrisman had an alibi, and I mean, comparing him to the photos, I guess, of the three tramps, I guess, of the million different people claimed were the three tramps, I guess Chrisman maybe vaguely looked like the old man tramp, but whatever the case, Newcomb suggested Larry Happenin is the guy who really looked into Chrisman during that period in 69, 70, and Happenin got a hold of Garrison, said, "So many words, you're barking up a tree there. It's going to undermine your book by
Yeah.
using this information about Chrisman because, like I said, Happenin had determined he's the one who found out that Chrisman had an alibi. Happenin was a teacher. I forget might have been teaching high school at that time and was
Yeah.
at some conference or something and met up with one of the persons who worked with Chrisman at, where was he at? That might have been, I think it was Rainier High School in Rainier, Oregon, who saw Chrisman there on the day of the assassination, and they provided written records to the House Select Committee on Assassination. So, I mean so that was kind of a important piece of information witnesses that Hapanin brought forward that basically threw a wet towel over at least Chrisman being in Dealey Plaza on the day of the assassination. Of course, that didn't stop any of these theories from growing since Chrisman died and after the House Select Committee on Assassination. Man, you can get online and punch in Chrisman, and a lot of people are sold on the theory that he was one of the three tramps.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and and it's, and I mean, even Garrison was like, well, isn't it amazing that Chrisman was, living in Oregon, and Clay Shaw went to Portland after San Francisco after the assassination. They must have crossed paths. That's why he was going to Oregon to see Chrisman, and he's writing this to the HSCA. I mean, it's just incredible.
Hey, I've been to Portland many times too.
Yeah.
I've been to Tacoma and Seattle, so
Yep,
guess I could be connected.
So yeah, no, a fascinating character. Looking forward to your book. I think it's going to be a really good book, and we'll go into Chrisman in more detail when that book comes out. Beckham,
For sure, yeah.
Beckham is another character who was associated with Chrisman, who went on to become not only a Garrison suspect, but Joan Mellon's key suspect in her book, Farewell to Justice.
What can you say? Boy, where to start with Beckham? I mean, he was a lifelong con man. You've done some good work on him as well. And I have an extensive write-up in the book, but he was involved in one scam over another over the years. He was like a lot of people associated with Chrisman. He had used different aliases. Mark Evans was one as a rockabilly and southern singer, or sometimes a preacher of some sort. He had all these different scams, and like Chrisman and some of these other folks they were connected to were involved in diploma mills of one type or another, and somehow the two and Beckham was pretty young. He was in his early 20s at the time he met Chrisman in 1966. Was a pretty accomplished con man by that time, and during the fall, I guess he got there supposedly in the spring of 66 through the fall, they started a bunch of dummy companies. One of them was a course to teach law enforcement that cost $500, and the FBI got involved in breaking that up. They're also involved in kind of a scam charity called the Northwest Relief Society that would leave donation cans in different bars and stuff. And the Olympia PD, I think, got in and broke that up. And I think there might have been more serious stuff going on. There's definitely allegations that there was a stolen car ring and just a lot of shady stuff. But Beckham basically split. This was his MO in the end of 66 and went to Omaha, where he started the same kind of shenanigans again. He'd go and he'd start like a thrift store, which he'd also set up as a Universal Life Church, where he could be a minister, like in the basement. And it would like a fly-by-night, and he'd be there for a few months or a few weeks. Allegations that he was fencing stolen material. And then he'd move on to the next scam.
My favorite Beckham scam is in the early 60s when he promoted a Ricky Nelson concert.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and of course, lo and behold, he brings in a Ricky, not the Ricky Nelson, but somebody else with the same name.
Well, it might have been him. It might have been him posing as
and
Ricky
then just
Nelson
ran off
too.
with the money.
And he did the thing on a more serious level, the same, like I said, the same MO in 76, where, and this was in Alabama, he started collecting money for a benefit for a couple of police officers that were killed for a country and music show. He claimed that initially Ernest Tubbs was going to be there with his group, but he got indicted for wire fraud and whatever, and he ended up federal indictment being prosecuted by Jeff Sessions, a future Attorney General of these United States. But he got off, he was acquitted, and he used the claim that he was working for the CIA. And so he was like doing a lot of this stuff in the interest of national security. I don't know. But there was enough reasonable doubts in the jurors' minds to get him acquitted. He had started, another things he was starting were these fake detective agencies, and one he named these Central Intelligence Alliance or something. He used the initial CIA, so he's kind of being truthful that he had started. He'd worked for the CIA, but yeah, quite a character. But it was that time, yeah, and so came out of that uh, trial that once again these rumors were surfacing again that he'd worked for the CIA, somehow involved with the Kennedy assassination. That's when the House Select Committee started talking to him again during that period when he was being prosecuted for that Alabama scam. He was in jail in Pine Bluff, and that the HSCA started talking to him there and interviewed him a couple more times. And he told, and from what I understand, he got immunity to talk to them, so he could say any damn thing he wanted to, and he was always kind of working the scam. Seemed like over the years to create this false story that he could profit on about him being involved in the Kennedy assassination as an unwitting kind of dupe who got sucked into the thing. And he was during the time he was talking to the HSCA, he was also shopping around a book, which was, I guess, some version of which was later published in the 2000s called
Remnants of Truth.
Yeah, it's definitely remnants of truth. So yeah, it was something he's always trying to.
I mean, my favorite is when he was testifying before the HSCA, he was listing off all his degrees. A degree in this, a
Uh-huh.
degree in that, all the universities, and he said, I have more degrees than a thermometer.
Mhm. He, actually, he stole that from one of his earlier trials when he was in, I think it was when he was in Omaha. He got busted for a diploma mill, and the judge chastised him, and the district attorney there said, "Yeah, this man has more degrees than a thermometer," and so Beckham loved that, and he started using it himself. And that's what's funny about that book of his, Remnants of Truth. There's not really a whole lot in there about the Kennedy assassination. I mean, there's a few pages. There's like a dozen or more pages of all his diplomas.
Yeah,
There's personal testimonies from his family members. It's like, okay.
it's a bizarre book, and I mean, it's just what a bizarre story, and I can't believe that Joan Mellon bought it. I mean, she was convinced that he had converted to Judaism, and she has a
Oh, yeah.
picture of him in these rabbinical robes, in her book, and then she has some claims that he had some sort of military document that he gave her that convinced her that he was, involved in all this, and of course, you never see the document.
Yeah. And that was similar in that same book. I believe it's in the introduction of the book. She also goes after Thornley, claiming he was CIA and that she saw a document that proved that. And I asked her at the time, And that was, when did that book come out?
2005 or something? Or...
Emailed her asking if I could get a copy of that. So at the time I read that, I go, whoa, that's, I took it kind of half seriously. I'd like to see that document that proves she never sent me the document at the time. She said she was sick or something. When she got better, she'd get it to me. But I emailed her a couple times, never heard back. I finally figured out what the document was, and you can see it in a post that Astoria Discordia called was Kerry Thornley, CIA. And so, no, that document did not prove Thornley was CIA. You can go, if people want more information, they can go read that. But yeah, there's also the document where she claims the document was from Chrisman, claiming that Beckham was part of this operation at a place called the Farm, I think, secret military, kind of Clockwork Orange place where they were creating these military assassins. And so, yeah, I never bothered asking her. I'd like to see what the document sounds like, another phony thing that maybe, who knows, Chrisman cooked up, or who knows? We've never seen it. Why don't you show it,
Yeah.
Now, he does, Beckham, he does have a ministry there in, where is that, Kentucky? Or at least did 10, 15 years ago, and an actual chapel that was a former synagogue, I think.
Right.
And so he's kind of a self-styled dude. So, yeah, so I guess he can say whatever he wants to say. He's a minister after some fashion, I guess.
Yeah, I strongly recommend people go read his testimony before the Garrison grand jury. It's absolutely hysterically funny when you read it, because it's just the way he lists off his degrees, and the way he answers questions, and he actually was accusing Garrison of homosexuality in his grand jury testimony.
That was the big bombshell he dropped at the end. Just
yeah.
What I think he was doing, it's that he was nervous obviously of going back to New Orleans, but I don't think he was nervous about Kennedy assassination stuff. He still had some charges hanging over his head for a number of things. There was that store that he and his brother ripped off. They both worked in this clothing store, and they stole a huge amount of the merchandise there, and were going to start their own stores. Once again, you look at the numbers, it was like $12,000 of merchandise. So you're talking, in today's numbers, $100,000 worth of stuff. So that charge was still hanging over his head. His brother had already served his time, but Beckham, as he was wont to do, it's been able to skip out on it. I think it looked like he faked a suicide at that time, went into a mental facility, then got out of there before he could face those charges. So those were still going on. And there was also the statutory rape charge that had never really been adjudicated either. So he had these things going on. And if you look at his testimony, he kind of touches on all that stuff and provides alternative facts of what actually happened, that he wasn't. So I think he was just trying to spin and cover for his past criminal activities, if you kind of read between the lines and a lot of that stuff. And he never really addresses questions. He just goes off on.
And then, of course, he ends up telling the HSCA about his involvement in the assassination. They realize it's all ridiculous. But then years later, Garrison believes, there's a confession tape, right?
Yeah,
it's Beckham, and Garrison's all excited. I've been vindicated. There's a confession tape, and I was right all along. And it was just Beckham, And
Well, Guy Russo has a good story about the confession tape.
Yeah,
You
Gus
interviewed
Russo.
him,
Yeah,
Gus Russo.
yeah,
You interviewed him. Did he
yeah.
talk about that? Okay, we
Yeah,
don't
well,
need
he
to.
basically he went to see Beckham in his office in I don't know, Kentucky or Omaha, and Beckham has all these fake diplomas on the wall, and at some point he sort of says, "Yeah, it's all ridiculous. Let's just play guitar," and they ended up
Yeah.
playing guitar the afternoon rather than talk about anything serious. He's
Well, Russo has this story where he was working with Bernard Festerwald and going to the National Archives looking for stuff, and this was like uh, kind of after, during, and after the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And at that time, all that was available were like old FBI files and other stuff. The House Select Committee stuff had been embargoed. And and part of that embargo came from the Black Congressional Caucus, really started the force that started those hearings on the different assassinations. And they were trying to keep a lid on the MLK materials just because of the hijinks of the FBI, all the that they thought it would tarnish his image, you know. There's all the wiretaps of his affairs, alleged affairs, and that type of stuff. So that's kind of the reason there was the embargo on those materials. But, and has Gus told you this story before?
no, no, go ahead, no.
Okay. And so he was going in there and looking for stuff. And one day he went into a little alcove where he found like a sheet that listed a bunch of stuff, and he looked at the numbers, and it was related to the embargoed material. So he grabbed whatever this was, a sheet of paper that was somewhere in this alcove, took it back to his desk and started writing down all these. He reckoned that it didn't say the House Select Committee on Assassinations. He just recognized the series of numbers. He goes, "Whoa, that's interesting. That's all the embargoed material." And there's a list of everything. One of the stuff on there was confession tape. Dun, dun, dun. So what he did, he thought, well, maybe I can do something with this list. He thought during certain times, like during lunch breaks and maybe on weekends, there was more inexperienced staff there, students and people maybe not quite as swift on the uptake as the regular archivists who manages. I'll take some of those numbers to them and see what they bring back to me. And sure enough, they brought back to him some of these embargoed materials.
Hmm.
A lot of them were these cassette tapes.
Right, yeah.
And so he's kind of freaking out here. Whoa. He goes back, and one of them, I'm not sure if he ever actually listened to the Beckham tape, but he started listening to these tapes on the equipment there. And the archives would supply you with a tape player and a duplicate thing where you could make copies. So that was the plan. He was going to come in there during lunchtime, start getting these embargoed classified materials, basically. And but it was going to take a long time. And so Fensterwald said, well, maybe we can get some machine where you can do a high-speed dubbing. And they got a hold of this big, clanky, huge machine that he was somehow able to get into the archives and started burning multiple copies at high speed and got busted by somebody caught him there. First they caught him with, you can't use that high speed machine. You're going to break the damn tapes. Oh, okay. Well, and he got clearance from the people that who were working during lunchtime, but this is one of the regular archivists, and so you got to stop that right now. You can't use them. The archivists started walking away. They turned back and saw it was the embargoed material, and they just flipped out, and took all the material, and Rousseau hightailed it out of there. and went back home to Maryland or wherever he was that weekend, expecting the FBI to raid him, but nothing ever came of it. And you should ask Gus. He has a write-up of this. It's like a dozen pages of this whole uh, experience. But that's when he first heard about that confession tape, which led him to doing some research on Beckham. And like you said, going to his storefront, and I guess he was in Kentucky at that time, and figuring out, yeah, that he was just a good-humored kind of con man, and they ended up jamming on guitars and singing that night.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's just. I mean, I could just sense how excited Garrison was to believe that he was finally being vindicated, by Thomas Beckham. I mean, it's just so funny. You
Well,
know?
there had been these rumors about the confession tape, and Garrison heard about it. Different staffers were saying there was a confession, and so that was spreading through the JFK research community at that time. It was the hot thing. Beckham's confession tape, which confessed to all number of things, yeah,
Yeah.
and it implicated dozens of different people, that had materialized during the Garrison investigation. I mean, Beckham connected them all, or claimed that, they were all connected. Oswald, Ruby, Bannister, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, he loved to drop names. I mean, he was just absolutely incredible. And what a character. I mean, just
Yeah.
really funny. I mean, if you read his testimony, either the HSCA or Garrison's grand jury, you can't help but laugh when you read it. I mean, it's actually quite funny when you read it. I don't know. I just don't know how Garrison could have taken him seriously after that, but he did. Of course, another
Yeah,
name that's not in Garrison's book. He left Beckham out of his book as well.
that is true. Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah, I
But of
wonder
course,
why.
like I said, Joe Millen ran with it and gave him his story another shot in the arm.
Yep, and yeah, and she bought it hook, line, and sinker, including the fact that he had converted to Judaism, which was absolutely hysterical. And it was his own branch of Judaism, right? It was his own special branch.
I don't know. I don't know what the heck it is, but he wears a yarmulke, and I think he might have some uh, family ties. They're Jewish to Judaism, but it's pretty.
Well, he sort of changed his name for a while, so it was like B apostrophe ECK, ECK, like it was a Jewish name.
Yeah. Yep.
You can't make this stuff up. Okay, so tell me what's next. You're writing a book on Chrisman. Tell us about your upcoming book and where you're going to go from there.
Yeah, it's almost done. Like it's mentioned, I interviewed Fred Chrisman Jr., which was interesting getting hold of him, and he's been really helpful in the endeavor. And other people I mentioned, like Larry Hapanen and Happinen, that's how you say it.
Yep.
Larry Happinen, and number of other people. It's been going on for numbers of years. It was kind of like the Thornley book, where just out of an interest, I'd gathered material on Thornley, and and after a while, you just have so much stuff and written articles related to Chrisman. It got to a point, well, maybe this is a book, and yeah, I've learned quite a bit over time to really expand on what's out there already.
Well, I can't wait till it comes out, and we'll have you back on to discuss the book when the book is published. It's definitely a needed book, and your stuff is absolutely magnificent. So we'll put links into your books in the description of the podcast, and I strongly recommend everybody go out and buy Adam Gorightly's books. They're just terrific.
Yeah, and check out Historia Discordia. That has some of the JFK assassination stuff, but
A lot
it's
of good
yeah.
stuff. A lot of
Mhm.
stuff on these characters are online on your website. Very important stuff with documents, photographs, etc. A lot of good primary material.
Yeah, I got pretty obsessive for a while with some of those posts there. I look back at them now, it's like, good Lord, 10,000 words in a blog post? What the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It's too much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll be back in touch sometime next year.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Fred.